thank you very much for the time today with you guys as the House Democrat prepare for this next session. I'll be very brief, and I'll be interested in your questions and what we think is the priorities for this session. As I stated on the floor, I do agree with the Speaker about some of the priorities that he outlined. And I'm proud to say that House Democrats have been championing these things for many years. First, when it comes to creating jobs, we need to get our economy going again. We need to do those tangible things that make sense for small businesses and the growth and expansion of new businesses in the state of Missouri. We should be focused on that, what we can to create jobs. That's challenging in a second point that we're going to focus on of the budget. As revenue has been a downturn, we're going to have a very challenging session. We look forward to working very closely with the majority and with the administration to really identify what are the top priorities in this budget cycle. We've always done that. Third, ethics reform. House Democrats for 7 years have introduced ethics reform measures. And those ethics reform measures now have the attention of the majority. The things that we'll be pushing for are things that have been outlined. But number one on that list is the reinstating of campaign finance limits. We believe that comprehensive ethics reform has to include the reinstation of campaign finance limits. You look about what the people of Missouri wanted. In the 90s, they voted about 75% that they wanted limits. Now in the state of Missouri, it's perfectly okay to give a candidate for state representative a $100,000 donation where you can't give a candidate for the President of the United States. That has a limit. We think that the money that comes through needs to be stopped. It needs to go back to what the people of Missouri think, and that has to be included in anything that was going to be called comprehensive ethics reform. And finally, we're going to be very well aware of this. The federal government and Congress is working on a health care reform bill. We have been the champions of increasing access to health care for years. We will be waiting for Congress with that bill, and we will be prepared to do what we need to do to implement it in Missouri. My fear is that we're going to have an idea that the federal government is going to do something, is going to pass a bill, and all the work is done. We know to really make sure that we're helping people in the area of health care, helping small businesses reduce their cost on that we need to make sure that we're doing our part to implement the federal program. I don't know what the federal program will be, but I'm pretty confident there will be something. So with that, I agree with the Speaker. I'm glad that he's picked up on some of the priorities that we've been pushing for years. It's gratifying when years ago we've been pushing some of these things and with no response, but persistence, persistence, persistence. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions or any of my member of my caucus.
Representative, this caucus is a no vote on any ethics bill that does not contain campaign finance reform limitations?
We're going to look at all the ethics reform. In fact, the governor came out last week with 4 pillars. I had a bill. We've had champions in this caucus who have had all these different bills. We'll look at each one of those measures and decide how to vote. But we are convinced that it's not going to be called, it can't be called comprehensive ethics reform unless you do have those campaign limits. We can pass a bill, but if it doesn't include that, we're missing out on the really important part of this.
Right. What are
yes.
your thoughts about forming a special standing committee rather than funneling it through some other committee?
What are my thoughts on that? It's interesting. I found out about this late last night. A few months ago, the speakers quoted, I think in the Joplin paper, that they didn't really have any thoughts on ethics. As we continue to push it and the governors continue to push it, all of a sudden there's a need for a committee. Whatever gets a bill passed that helps renew the accountability of this government, we're for. I appointed some members, and I think they're going to be outstanding, and it's a good arena. I'm not sure why he decided to do a different committee, but there you go.
To follow up on what Kermit was asking, Charlie Shields has just all but said campaign finance limit is dead in the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that you can reach agreement first in the House and then get it through the General Assembly as a whole?
That's a very good question. I think we can reach agreement in the House. The question I have is, will the Republican leadership allow us to vote on that on the floor? Because if you remember, in 2008, the limits were kicked off the last hour of the last day of session by one vote. Since that time, you know, I've had a bill for 2 years. I have a handful of Republicans who have co-sponsored that bill. I think there'll be other ones. I think some Republican members are even in the press saying they wish they would have voted differently. So I think we can get to 82 that way. Will the question come up? As far as the Senate, though, I think we need to do what's right, and I think we need to go after real comprehensive reform. And again, this caucus is sticking to the fact that has to be included on comprehensive reform. So let's try to get it out of the House, and hopefully the Senate will see the same thing.